welcome you to our Standby House's signature event for the fall term and the touch-off event for about a month of activities organized with Mark Dowdhouse, who is the faculty head of House of East House, and of activities around the 2008 presidential election. Before I introduce our panel and introduce our forum, I want to give a shout out to my standby students, the students in my class, to East House, and to all of the Commons students. To those that are, to our guests, the Commons is brand new. It opened this fall with 1,570 freshmen and 10 courageous faculty members, one for each house. Our role as faculty members is primarily to be intellectual mentors for the freshman class. Our job is to capture them at 18 and make sure they become the greatest leaders that America has ever seen, and certainly the most learned leaders that America has ever seen. Tonight's event is part of Standby House's theme, which is citizenship, community, and self. We've been watching the presidential debates and having discussions in our house. There's more to come. We'll be watching the presidential conventions, We'll be watching the debates starting tomorrow night. And I think this is an appropriate way to spend part of our time. These students are probably not aware yet, but will be so soon, that this election will be a watershed in American history. If for no other reason, a white woman, had a real shot at being president of the United States. And then along came an unknown, skinny little black man with a funny name that nobody ever heard of, who was actually the Democratic candidate. There's never been a woman or an African-American candidate of either party in the 200-plus years of American history. If you've been paying attention to the fact that our economy is on the edge of collapse and all the politics around that, you should know that much more is yet to come. The campaign's going to get nastier and more complicated before it's all over. Some of us are praying for a Obama victory. Some are praying, at least up until yesterday, for a McCain victory. What we want to do tonight is to explore another phenomenon of this election that's very important, and that is the emergence of a very broad interest on the part of young people. 18, 19, 20-year-olds are excited about an election in a way they haven't been since the 1960s and the early 1970s. They are engaged with this election. We want to talk about what that engagement means. Our panel is called Rap Sessions, a group of professors, artists, and intellectuals and writers who are concerned with the youth vote and the politics of our nation in what is called by one of our presenters the hip-hop generation. This panel includes a hip-hop artist, one half of the hip-hop political team, Dead Prez, to my right, M1, which is his stage name, I found out. I know he's known because one of my students, freshmen, were quickly told me last week, I listened to his music. I know him, Professor Patterson. Okay, so. A second member of this august group is Maya Rockeymoore, CEO of Global Policy Solutions and author of the Political Action Handbook, a how-to guide for the hip-hop generation. And I believe this is Maya. I haven't met her yet. I saw her, but I didn't realize that's who she was. The third member of our panel is Dr. Vijay Prashad, author of The Darker Nations, A People's History of the Third World, and Professor of International Studies at Trinity College. I specifically asked for Professor Prashad. I had not met him. We've talked over the phone over the years, and I've used his books, and I have been enthralled with his work. Our fourth member I did meet this morning, Angela Woodson, Director of Faith-Based and Community Outreach for the Ohio Governor's Office and co-founder of BUILD, which means Blacks United in Local Democracy. Our fifth panelist is the novelist Adam Mansbach, who I must admit I've read one piece by him, which I thought was stunning, which was online, and I can't wait to read his novels. He teaches at San Francisco's Art Institute and is the author of the novels Angry Black White Boy, Shackling Water, and The End of the Jews. Our moderator, who I've known since he was in that note. I have known since he was an undergraduate at University of Rochester. Bakari Kitwana, author of the Hip Hop Generation and co-founder of the National Hip Hop Political Convention. And our beautiful location here on the Peabody campus. I give you Bakari, who will moderate this panel.
How's everybody doing today? Good. All right. So, what we're going to do is have a very passionate conversation. You all will be involved. We're not going to just entertain you. So, we're going to talk amongst ourselves for about 45 minutes, and then we're going to open it up to the floor to hear your questions and comments. Is that all right? All right, all right. This is how we like to do it, because a lot of times you have these kind of discussions and people come and talk about what they want to talk about, and people leave without getting an opportunity to say what's on their mind. And a lot of times we find what the audience has to say is often more important than, equally important, to what's being said by the panel. So I'm going to make a couple of opening remarks about what Rap Sessions is and some of the things we've done recently. We have been doing Rap Sessions tours, taking these difficult dialogues to hip-hop audiences across the country for the last 4 years. This year we focused on hip-hop in the 2008 presidential election. We thought and kind of knew it was going to be big. We didn't anticipate how big it was going to be, but we wanted to be ahead of the curve on it. So we started working on this a long time ago. We've done we did 10 sessions in the spring, we did 2 over the summer. We have about 4 more to go before this year is out. And so we are nonpartisan, and so we want to hear from all political perspectives. We're not just pushing anybody's agenda, and sometimes we're really not pushing anybody's agenda. People don't like that, but we feel that people should have the right to make their own decisions. I think it's very important for us that people are just informed on the issues and make their own decisions. We're supposed to be a democracy still, but who knows, by the time that vote is up on the dollars, the $700 billion, things may change. So Campus Progress, who's set up outside, is one of our sponsors. And they work with young people across the country on college campuses. And they have a national conference every summer where they invite and fly in promising young undergraduates who are interested in political work. And so you might want to meet some of the folks out there. The conference is phenomenal. They've had Bill Clinton speak there. They've had Barack Obama speak there. Last year they were trying to get Dave Chappelle. I don't know if that happened. M1 has been there, and others. So basically, this year, one of the things that we wanted to do different with Rap Sessions was we decided we'd do a poll. So we hired a company that does polling, and we did a survey of the hip-hop voting bloc because we felt that there were issues that general polls like Gallup and Washington Post, New York Times, they didn't ask the right questions that were relevant to our audience. one of the things we found were that the top 3 issues to young people, and this is kind of funny because these issues have kind of taken a back seat in the national campaign. The top 3 issues of young people were 1, ending the war in Iraq, 2, living wage jobs, and 3, gas prices, lowering gas prices. We felt that these should be the issues that the candidates should be talking about most, and ironically, they're probably the issues that the candidates are talking about the least. And so we continue to wonder why they say young people are not engaged in the process. So there are other findings, and we can get into some of that later, but I wanted to share that with you. The survey is going to be released in a couple of weeks. It's 1,000 young people surveyed, 18 to 31 years old and 32 to 45-year-olds, equal parts Latino, Black, white, equal parts men and women, and just really interesting stuff. One of the things that I thought was really interesting was that the survey on the question of the major candidate did break down along race in the same way as it has in the mainstream polls, which was kind of surprising to me, but still more younger people within each area, leaning more towards, more younger white kids leaning more towards Barack than people in the older age group. I could go on, but let's get the conversation started. Let me just explain some of the format and some of the reasons why we did this. One of the reasons is we saw this continued escalation of young people. Many of us were involved in organizing young people in 2004. We saw a continued escalation of young people participating in the electoral process in 2004, again in the off-year election in 2006, again in the primaries earlier this year, record levels of youth voter turnout. Another point I want to raise is a book that came out this year, a couple of months ago, written by a professor and think tank talking head, John McWhorter. And the book focuses on hip-hop and basically makes an argument against hip-hop having an irrelevance. And so I bring it up to say that the idea that hip-hop has no relevance in a political campaign in an election year should be seriously called into question when you have someone from the Manhattan Institute, a major conservative think tank, writing a book about hip-hop and saying that it's irrelevant politically in an election year. So, I'm going to jump right in now. The format, basically, I've explained. We're going to have a couple of comments from each of the panelists, and then we're going to jump into your questions and comments. I want to begin with Angela Woodson, who... Angela Woodson was the co-chair of the 2004 National Hip Hop Political Convention that brought over 4,000 young people to Newark to create and endorse a national political agenda for the hip hop generation. And so, Angela, if you can just give a picture of how this hip hop political organizing has evolved over the last 4 years. And who some of the major players are. I mean, I'm sure people have heard about T.I. and the Hip Hop Caucus, trying to have this. Just last weekend, they were planning to register 50,000 young people over the course of the weekend. But if you can just kind of talk about some of the groups and the players.
Hello? Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Oh, come on, y'all. We don't sleep at these. We're wide awake at these. I mean, if we're going to move the movement, we got to move the movement, and that takes energy. So we're 40-something days out of an election, a major election, so you got to be awake with us. We don't need you to sleep, especially on this one. In 2004, when we came together to put together the National Hip Hop Political Convention, we were tired of everyone saying that gangster rap, and this kind of rap, and that kind of rap, and that kind of hip hop, drugs, money, and bling wasn't concerned about the community and the direction the country was going. So it also sparked the interest of the Russell Simmons, of the Sean P. Diddy Combs, and Citizen Change, with Bakari Kitwana, myself, Ross Baraka, several of us to get together with the Hip Hop Convention, the Hip Hop Caucus, the Hip Hop Congress, with Reverend Yearwood. to say, no, we do care about our community, and we do care about who leads this country. So a lot of us, there was a lot of energy placed on voter registration and being able to educate and do a lot of civic engagement. Because the one thing we understood is that the college students seem to understand it, but outside of these walls, the barbershop, the beauty shop, and our friends that we might have graduated from high school with, were not connecting and not registering to vote and not taking part in the process. So therefore, what we did understand was the umbrella and the beauty of hip hop, we said, was universal. It's colorblind. It brings together all genders, all races because of the music, the beats, the flow of the poetry, the lyrics. And we said, regardless of your social economic level or your education level, what we understood was this was one piece that brought everybody together, and why not utilize that to educate those on why they need to take part in the political process. So that was a lot of the motivation with all of us coming together in 2004, and also being pissed off about 2000. I mean, here was a race that we all looked at and we said, well, wait a minute. We didn't know who won. We went to bed, we woke up, still didn't know who won. There was a lot of confusion. So it gave us a lot of conversation to explore why did this happen in the way that it happened. And we can't afford to let that happen again, and that's why we got out in the streets and really made our voices be heard. And also, we recognized there was already a lot of local organizing and activity going on that no one was bringing to the national circuit. No one was exposing the Shamacos with the Hip Hop Congress in California, who was already doing organizing, but it just wasn't being exposed. And so these vehicles started exposing that and started connecting a lot of the dots to encourage young people not just to look at the presidency, but also within the hip-hop generation to look at the Senate, to look at the Congress, to look at the governor, to look at the state Senate and the state representatives and your mayors and your city council. And then also where we were looking at, where are the young people in office? Who's grooming these people to not only just get the degree of political science, but to move on to elected office? Because what we keep hearing is we still see the civil rights movement being very strong within this, but where were the younger voices? If you want the change and the change that a lot of us gripe about, then how come your voice wasn't represented at the table? Why? Because you all weren't engaged for some whatever reason, but we realized you wanted to be engaged. So that's a lot of what our direction was going to, and is still building. I think it's building even stronger, regardless of the fact of all of the, as we laugh about it, the whole construction around and reconstruction of all this financing of the 527s and the 501c3s and C4 work that gave a lot of these hip-hop vehicles a lot of funding, but the vehicles are still there and the vehicles are still operating and the vehicles are still moving. And we think we still have to move, and we still have a lot of work to do still within it.
I'm going to come back to you on those 527 and the other numbers and letters. I want to ask Maya, can you talk some about the evolution of the idea that young people, college students, because they're out of state, can't vote? Can you bring some clarity around that issue?
And the reason why he directed that question to me is because I'm actually an graduate of Prairie View A&M University, and I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but it is a historically black college in Texas that is located smack dab in the middle of a county that has historically been, basically racially prejudiced. And in Prairie View, they have had a historic struggle with the students wanting and desiring to vote in the county in which they reside. And it led to a 1979 Supreme Court case in which the students of Prairie View challenged the county officials because they wanted to vote where they went to school. And the county officials were trying everything in the book to keep them from doing so. And what ended up happening is the Supreme Court decided in the students' favor. And so that is actually the law of the land. If students want to vote where they go to school, they are able to. You are able to now. But we're seeing tactics across the country where local government officials are trying to suppress the student vote. We're seeing it up until Prairie View, even though they set the standard with the Supreme Court case in 1979, is still going through it. Not 4 years ago, they had a situation where the county DA basically threatened to jail the students if they voted and charge them a $10,000 fine. When I went to school there, and I was actually I was a political science major and I ran the political science club, and we were registering people to vote for a hot local election. But they actually arrested 9 students and booked them, saying that they were voting illegally. So there's been a pattern of harassment and intimidation in that school. So I just say that to say that absolutely, but you should know the law, and the law is you're able to register to vote where you go to school. You have a right to. With that, I don't know if you want me to set any other context, or will you come back to me?
I'm going to come back to you. I want to come back to Angela on the same issue, because we're seeing it also play out around this foreclosure issue. And I know she talked with Congressman Conyers yesterday, and in his state, there's been a lot of this activity around voter suppression, is how he's framed the question. Can you talk about that some?
What's going on, if you're not aware, is the states that have high foreclosure rates, they're trying to say that these individuals that now have lost their homes, or you that are the students that have moved and relocated, maybe you're not in your dorm, maybe you're in an apartment, maybe you moved into a fraternity or sorority houses, are not going to have problems trying to vote on election day because they want you to prove your residency. So what some of the arguments around this is some states like mine in Ohio, our Secretary of State, who oversees our Board of Elections, has made the statement that as long as you can show where you live, you will still be offered a ballot to vote. So we're being sued. The Republicans are suing us on that particular note. And in Michigan, they, on the other hand, will not acknowledge you if you have moved. They do not want to let you vote. And so the Democrats have filed a suit. Barack Obama's camp has filed a suit with them. So this is a very interesting issue because, again, I got a text message as I was showing Bakari today that if you wear campaign gear to the polls, that you will not be allowed to vote. So dialogues like this is important because what you hear from here, you really have to go not only outside of this room to connect with your fellow classmates, but beyond these walls. One of the things I've urged in these different type of dialogues is this is your home. You might be from a different city in a different state, but this is your home. And outside of these walls, this institution occupies a neighborhood. How dare you reside here for 4 to 5 years and get the education that you are about to get and not participate in your neighborhood and not take the knowledge that you're gaining and utilize it with your neighborhood. That's what's wrong with our neighborhoods. You have got to get out here. And what you're hearing today, you can go in the polls and vote. Just take your pen and put it in your pocket. Just take your Barack Obama hat off and put it, just take it, leave it outside in the car and go vote. They just don't want you to wear it inside the polls. That's all. Turn your shirt on backwards. If you wear an Obama shirt, just turn it inside. I know, that hurts. But just turn it inside out, but you can still go vote. So these rumors have got to be killed. Because if they're not, you have people that won't show up and vote. And it's more than just Obama, and I'm loving him too, y'all, but come on. We got U.S. Congress people. Look what's going on now with this whole Wall Street debacle. We have Congress and senators that are going to make a decision on this. They are now our voices. These are the people that we too have to vote into office. So while you're being excited about Obama, you've got to be excited about this part too, because they're our voices, and what they decide is going to mean something for the next 10 years. So, these are rumors that we have to kill. Pay attention to your state. Make sure here in the state of Tennessee that you all aren't a part of this madness with foreclosure. I notice you all don't have the high foreclosure rate like Michigan, like Florida, like Illinois, like New York, like Ohio. We're being targeted because we have high foreclosure, and who happens to be a part of that are a lot of young people, and they're just trying to add them into this equation. But, as the lawsuits come out, pay attention, because if you even have an absentee vote, like if you're not going to vote here in Tennessee, and you're from Ohio, Michigan, you want to pay attention to if that vote is even going to be counted.
Angela, one last thing I want to ask you, around this whole question of swing states. One of the things that's been happening in Ohio, which is a swing state where I live, There have been organizers coming in, and this happens from outside the state, who are trying to organize young people to come to Ohio to organize. I'm curious to know what do you think about that? I mean, is it a sound thing to leave, let's say, Tennessee to go to Ohio as opposed to organizing in Tennessee? What do you think about that?
Stay here in Tennessee. I mean, there's so much work to be done. I heard somebody say we're going to be red anywhere. I said, oh Lord, please don't, because Ohio is probably going to be red, and I'm praying that my vote is even counted here. Because as you look at Ohio and Florida, we always seem to make national news in every election for some odd reason. But the reality is, again, you are a part of the neighborhood. This is your home. I can't urge you enough. If you are just in here and your dorm is not all fully registered, regardless of where they live, that's your fault. That's your fault. You should take responsibility and accountability for your own home. Please. Make sure all of your people on your dorm floor in your dorm are registered, even if it's here or not here. That's how you do that. That's your part. That's your contribution. You don't need to come to Ohio and help us. We all falling on top of each other right now. You got a bunch of out-of-state people that don't even know which way to go. They knocking on vacant buildings and saying, hey, nobody's home. And, they go into vacant land where the houses have burned down. And, I mean, it's really sad to watch. And those of us that are there are just sitting there saying, well, you could have asked me and I might could have helped you. But you decided to go recruit busloads of people and throw them in the neighborhoods that we knew didn't exist. But for some reason, you're working off of a data list from 2000 instead of a data list from 2006. But that's the method to their madness. But again, I just urge everybody, take care of their home. Because again, all politics is local.
I want to get Vijay into the conversation. And I want to try to see if we can broaden the discussion a little bit. Angela made mention of the economic crisis going on right now. Can you talk about how that may have an effect on the election and what kind of position, how it's going to affect whoever is elected?
It's an enormous story. I mean, one of the things to keep in mind is the fact that we as a population are so illiterate about what's happening demonstrates how power has made financial matters undemocratic. I mean, basically, the fact that we don't know what a credit default swap is, what mortgage-backed securities are, is itself an indication of the gap between the masters of the universe and the rest of us. So that's the first thing. I mean, everybody in the media is scrambling to get a handle on what's happening. I mean, they have hidden everything from us. Nobody knows what these things are worth. We don't understand the toxicity. We're just sort of driving blind. The lawmakers seem to be illiterate about it as well. I mean, I listen to some of them, and I'm amazed by their lack of comprehension of where power actually resides, which is not in Washington, D.C., but which is with international bankers. And they don't understand what's happening. So, there's that to keep in mind. I would like to one day, if I had Adam's talent, write a novel, which is a novel that starts with Barack Obama and Michelle Obama at night, lying in bed, and them looking at each other and saying, what kind of party do we belong to? We belong to a party that has within it a strong Wall Street wing. Robert Rubin, for instance, is as responsible for this crisis, as it were, as Phil Graham. So in my opinion, when they look at each other, they have to say, Rubin came to the Clinton administration from Goldman Sachs. Rubin came there and encouraged Clinton to avoid the fight on healthcare and move NAFTA. Goldman Sachs then went in and underwrote Mexican bonds. When Mexico had a bond crisis in 1998, Rubin whispered in Clinton's ear and said, we have to bail out Mexico. They bailed out Goldman Sachs. Rubin, along with Phil Graham, who whispers in McCain's ear, said we have to undo and finally repeal Glass-Steagall. They did that in 1999. Rubin, with Phil Graham, created the Commodity Futures Modernization Act. both of them signed by Clinton, no dimmer,
Right.
no protest, no veto. He signed it happily. That sets the foundation for the construction of what becomes City Corps. And then Rubin leaves the White House and becomes the head of City Corps. City Corps is the poster child of today's international banking crisis. So you have Barack and Michelle Obama looking at each other and saying, what is this? We don't have a party of the people. We have a party where the people have its hopes vested in us, but the party is still captured by the Wall Street interests. I mean, what we have to do, if we're actually going to be serious about the future, we have to understand that we have to either recapture these political formations or we have to produce our own political formations. Because the danger is we're going to put somebody with impeccable, I believe, morals, ethics, whatever, into the position where he is going to be trapped, where the population is going to be disheartened, and that once again is an opening for all the forces of the right to come in braying hungry dogs, to once again decimate any gains made in the Hope agenda. I cut my political teeth working for Jackson in 1988. That was a period as enthusiastic for young people. Young people came out in droves for Jackson. We fought hard for Jackson. It's not the only time that young people have been in election. We killed ourselves for Jackson. And they killed the Jackson agenda. There was no Jackson. Who killed the Jackson agenda? Clinton, the Democratic Leadership Council. You know, it's really as much about November 2nd as it is destroying the Democratic Leadership Council, as destroying the wing of that party run by Robert Rubin. If we're not thinking that, we're not going to understand that if Obama does win, when he swears in January, he is going to have a mountain of debt over him. There will be no social democratic agenda. No chance of living up to any of the very lukewarm promises he's made. We need to understand that. We need to go to the people and explain to them that what this agenda, the Clinton-Bush agenda, what they have done is they have bankrupted the ability for the resurrection of social democracy in the short term. We need to revive an agenda for social democracy. We need to work through the political process, through the electoral process, and more. What we need is a new imagination. That's what we have to be fighting for.
I want to ask you if you can talk some about the ways that race and gender have entered into this election in interesting ways.
You know, they've entered in interesting ways, but in ways that smack of celebrity. You know, this is about a woman. This is about a multi-ethnic man who is black. This is not about a feminist agenda. This is not about an anti-racist agenda. This is not an agenda against systematic racism, against the construction of a disposable population languishing in jail. Nobody has mentioned the prison industrial complex. This is not about the fact that millions of people are treated when they're outside jail as if they're in jail. See, this is not an agenda actually about race or actually about feminism. This is an agenda about a black man, about a woman. And that's important, and that is a serious advance for our broad, overarching movement. But we have to also understand that we cannot mix the coming to power of a person with the coming to power of an agenda. There's a separation, a distinction, and I will fight till I cry for the person to come to power. But I will never allow us to go to the people and say that we have to collapse the person coming to power with an agenda coming to power. There is no agenda coming to power now. There is a person coming to power.
Okay. All right. I want to turn to M1 because Vijay's talked a little bit about race, and I know that you have been a part of the Uhuru People's Movement. We had the issue down in Florida a couple of months back where the young brothers from the Uhuru People's Movement challenged Barack when he was making a statement. Can you speak on that? And also, if you can also talk about, I know that you've been involved in some of the protests around the DNC and the RNC. You got to paint a picture to folks what's going on the ground out there, because I think that what we saw in the media what was actually happening on the ground were kind of two different things.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I was a member of the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement, which was built by the African People's Socialist Party as a broad-based democratic rights organization in 1991. And it's called the National People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, or NPDM. And what you may have seen on CNN or on TV was a young brother who was relatively new to the Uhuru movement. His name is Diop. And young Diop, who I helped to bring in the movement in New York City, where I was the local chapter president up until 2002. People still attribute that to me, and that's not the case. I'm not even active in the Uhuru movement at this particular time. But it was that organization that informed my political education in the way that it has, that helped me to come to some of the conclusions that I've been able to put out through the music of Dead Prez, and to help to politicize in the cultural world our young and upcoming leaders, future leaders. And I think that's the question at hand today, is where will true leadership come from? Because what we're grooming now, it definitely isn't that when we are forced to accept this two-party system, and that there's no other way that we can think. So going back to the question, young Diop, well, Obama, Barack Obama, Senator Obama had gone through Tampa, St. Petersburg, which is the headquarters of the Uhuru movement, has been for the last 20 years. Even since 1972, the Uhuru movement had been headquartered in St. Petersburg, Florida, moved to Oakland, California, and has recently, in the last 10 years, migrated back to St. Petersburg, where it has had a stronghold there. Mainly because of the way that our working class community is treated. You know, the main issues there are we are combating police brutality versus economic development, social justice. This is the battleground that happens in St. Petersburg with a pretty much unbroken chain of resistance since the 60s. Organizations like JOMO, of course, residue from the Black Panther Party, Revolutionary Action Movement, RAM, SNCC, had run through that particular place and helped to provide some sort of ground that had kind of been seasoned with revolutionary fervor, or the ability to organize against like systematic terror, basically. And with that being in place, for Obama to come and have this open debate, knowing that Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the Uhuru movement was there, it was a prime opportunity for this to happen. So I don't want anybody in this room to think that it just who knows about what happened in St. Petersburg, Florida? Who knows what about it? Okay, well, I'll explain. This debate, which happened in St. Petersburg, Florida, which I'm explaining the groundwork behind, there was a young brother who was a member of this very organization that helped bring me into political understanding, who happened to position himself in the crowd. Of course, as being a democratic rights organization, I'm not a Democrat nor Republican, and that's not the place that the Uhuru movement is standing either. So he came with an agenda, really to expose what the Democratic platform had not been able to provide, had not been able to deliver in covering our broad issues in the working class community. So, this brother, young brother Diop, I would say he was about 25 years old, came, sat silently during the whole debate or speech, and at the end, unfurled a banner, and I don't even know what the banner said, but it was pretty small. But people who saw that he was attempting to put forth issues or talk in a way that Barack Obama was not yet addressing issues, they thought that he was going to be a distraction to this particular event. So you see people kind of reaching for the banner and snatching it down. Nonetheless, the young brother had a right to speak, and he did. He started saying, what about the people? What about these issues? What about these issues? To the point that it got Senator Obama's attention. And I think, dare I say, it was at the end of this particular event. He took the time actually to let the young brother Diop express himself. And it made national coverage because I think what was able to be put on the table at that particular time was crucial, especially with what's happening in communities like St. Petersburg or in Houston, Texas, or in Brooklyn, because there has been no mention of what's happening around issues of racial profiling, around issues of the prison industrial complex, around economic development. That's in a basic strategy for black people, unequivocally, which Senator Obama belongs to the black race. So here we are with these things being put out there, and I think what you saw was Senator Obama beginning to come up with, or trying to retort with reason about the work that he has been doing in these particular areas. But we see that the limits to what that is. My point being, and because this is where I step in, I'm not a member of the Uhuru movement now, is that we do need a long-term strategy to change the terrain, to change the political arena inside our community. If not, then we're going to be dealing with this same old cooked up soup again and again every 4 years. We're not teaching people how to be movers and shakers, freedom fighters, proactive, even in times where there's no election year. And that's the disservice that we pay to our community at this particular time. And I applaud the Uhuru movement for being there and for being able to raise critical questions, which I believe are hard ones for Obama to answer, especially being put in a particular position that he's in, not being able to move to and fro because of the ropes that hold him, that bind him from certain political entrapments, being involved with the Democratic Party. So with that being said, we need more of that. We need people to challenge the system and challenge that in order for us to get more room, more wiggle room, what I call real democratic space, because that's the only space we have now in order to move around and do what we can do in this time before the gates close.
Can you talk, Matulu, a little bit about some of the protest activity around both of the conventions?
Yeah, I was, pardon me, I forgot. Well, I'm a member of a group called Dead Prez, which means Dead Presidents, which means Dead the President. And realistically, it is the reason why, because for people to have real political power, I think we have to encourage leadership, individual leadership, personal responsibility. I know candidates throw this thing around all the time, personal responsibility, but your real personal responsibility is going to be when you wake up and say what you're willing to do today. What you really willing to do today. And so, I was invited to the Democratic National Convention in Denver, not as a Democrat, and not to sing on the stage and praise Obama. And I have no problem doing it, especially for things that I think do connect with our agenda. However, there's so many issues that are loose. There's so many loose things that aren't attached to where we need to go, that there were people who were there in the thousands. They didn't really report this to you the same way that they reported it at the Republican National Convention. But on the Capitol steps, me and my partner Stickman did a performance for about 45 minutes that concluded a rally, which there were speakers such as Cynthia McKinney and Rosa Clemente, who's usually a member of this panel, and Fred Hampton Jr. Even Fox News came and it was jeered out of there with people saying "fuck Fox." Excuse my language, but that's really what happened. It was a great day. It was a great day. But I think the reality is that there was a convention that was happening that would pull the line for so many people who have their vested interest in seeing the Obama campaign change miraculously our lives once he takes office. But we know that there are clear issues that are not being addressed. One is the issue of political prisoners, which was a march that happened. There was a Poor People's March that happened right at that time. There was also a rally against the war, which Obama is clear that his objective too is to put troops in Afghanistan. I guess some of you might be for that. I have the same position that I've always had: stop the war here in our community. And so all these people, there are thousands of us who were in Denver protesting the fact that the Democratic platform has not and still refuses to address these issues. Which also happened a week later at the Republican National Convention, which I also attended. I was invited to. I wouldn't have been there if I wasn't invited. The police was crawling everywhere. It's nowhere you really want to be. But also on the Capitol steps in St. Paul, Minnesota, the same thing happened. However, there were I would say, at least 50,000 more protesters there. For obvious reasons, because the Republican agenda is in line with some of the most oppressive agendas that's going today. So when you talk about the aggression in the Middle East, you find some of the most red-handed people are sitting right in the Republican Party. All of us are implicit in it because we are the ones who put these people in power. However, there were protests and culturally groups like myself and Rage Against the Machine who were not allowed to perform. It happened that just as Rage Against the Machine, does anybody here know who Rage Against the Machine is? Okay. Just as Rage Against the Machine was about to hit the stage, it was maybe an hour or so after we got off the stage, I think. The time kind of flies. They cut the sound, they cut the power. And it was the worst thing that could happen during the Republican National Convention because just at that time, when they cut the power, Zach De La Rocca grabbed a megaphone and began to chant his songs into the crowd at this rally, long enough for the Poor People's Rally and the anti-war rally, which had been raging all day long, been trying to be contained, maced. They had been pepper sprayed, shot plastic bullets at all day long to contain these group of thousands and thousands of people who the crowd was growing by the minute. And just as we were not allowed to see Rage Against the Machine get on the stage, this huge protest comes around the corner, and the flood of people who were not able to enjoy that part of the concert, which was the rally, just filled right into the ranks, and that's what you saw in the news and on the papers because it had to be a protest by which the ranks. I mean, I had never been to anything like this before, and believe me, I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot. But it was really politically high energy. I think you see the displacement of a lot of our issues, and I think you see now the grounds for us to really build, and it would really be a shame if we didn't take this time. Those of us who feel that there's a place for us, but not in the A or B category, there's a place for us. The time is now to build our political infrastructure and be able to move forward in the future, and that's what happened.
I want to just say something to at the Democratic National Convention where I went as a reporter. I think it was the greatest police presence I can ever remember seeing in this country. And so I went back and I kind of I ended up took a lot of pictures of the police around the city. It took like about 100 photos. But one of the things that people kept saying that was really striking to me was some people were saying, were questioning, are we a police state? And other people were saying, I sure feel safer. And so it was just interesting to see that. It was interesting to me to see that contrast. And I know a lot of your work, Vijay talks about, like the breakdown of democracy. Like what is democracy? When do we cease to be one? So it was interesting to see that play out. And one of the things that I found was $50 million was given to both conventions, $50 million each, just for the security and police presence alone. It was the highest amount given. The previous years had been $25 million, but $50 million. And in St. Paul, there was a lot of conversation in the media throughout the state of Minnesota around the question of whether or not people were going to allow their local city councils were arguing whether or not they're going to send police to participate in this because they were being paid out of this $50 million budget. And so the arguments were, we're going to be able to get more experience, we're going to be able to do what we do better. And so it was interesting, and I was reading that stuff before, but it was interesting to see just even on the media coverage of the police presence at St. Paul by contrast to the police presence that I saw myself in Denver, but which didn't get the same play in the media. Yeah. So I want to turn to Adam. Adam has been writing some of the strongest pieces that I've read this year on election coverage, and sometimes quite cynical. His last piece was called, he wrote an open letter to swing voters. But Adam, can you talk some about the media? We've seen this in the last couple of weeks. John McCain, Senator McCain, the media kind of almost defending him in a way, saying that he didn't make the statement, we'd be in Iraq for 100 years. So it's like this thing, well, he did say it, because I've seen several videos of him saying it. So it's interesting to see that the media is kind of almost playing the role of more than reporting. But that's one part. But I know you've been interested in this question of media. Then the other thing was when the Phil Graham thing happened, when the economic crisis kind of came to the surface, like a couple of days ago, Phil Graham had been an economic advisor to John McCain, like one of his top. But then when the media covered the story, some places got it, but like there's a big front page story on USA Today that listed both economic advisors from both camps to kind of talk about where they fell in terms of jobs and payouts from these various banks and investment banks. And Phil Graham wasn't even mentioned. So can you just talk a little bit about your observation of the role the media has played in the election? And of course, I know you have responses to everything that's been said. And then we'll give Maya the last word, and you guys can start your questions.
Okay. Well, first of all, I feel a little bit guilty even being here on this panel without this economic crisis being resolved. You know, I thought about canceling my appearance. But I decided ultimately it was better for the country if I did show up. You know, it's fascinating, and with less than 2 months left in this elongated election cycle, I'm experiencing a certain amount of fatigue as someone who's been following this stuff carefully for damn near 2 years now. It's astounding how long this cycle has been, and the changes, between 2008 and 2004 in terms of media coverage. Some of them are very obvious. The continuing proliferation of the blogosphere, the way in which there are more news outlets available now than ever before, and the way in which a certain kind of authority has been sacrificed by each and every one of those outlets with the growth of every other one. So, to draw a comparison between the way things were, let's say, 40 years ago, at the dawn of kind of the television age, and today, I should say closer to 50 years ago, really, the notion of getting your nightly news from one of 3 network sources, each of them chaired by an avuncular old white dude with some gray hair, some black hair, who was supposed to be a trustworthy figure and was a known face, a known entity. Walter Cronkite, that's my guy. That's where I get my news. I'm a Channel 7 man to the death. And really, I only have 2 other choices. It can be 7, 4 or 5, and the other 2 dudes just look exactly like him, and they say pretty much the same stuff. It's a dramatic change between that kind of paradigm and the one we see today, where really you can get your news from any number of outlets, and not only that, you can tailor your consumption based on your beliefs and your priorities, not just in the news field, but really down to every consumer choice you make. In a lot of ways, in the absence of a sustainable activism, the absence of a well-organized resistance movement that is able to do the things it needs to do, a lot of those energies have been channeled into consumerism, so that you define yourself not by what you do, but by how you buy, right? So if you are self-identified as a conscious kind of person, you buy a Dead Prez out, you buy a Talib Kweli out, and maybe that's all you do, right? Maybe that act in itself is in your mind enough. That kind of consumerism is your way of defining yourself, of making a contribution. By the same token, if you are a conscious kind of person, maybe you shop at Whole Foods instead of, the A&P. I was in Walgreens the other day for the first time in a long time because I am that Whole Foods type of dude. And it was shocking to me. There was literally, if you had, y'all know what a Venn diagram is? You know the Venn diagram from high school, the math thing, right? The little intersecting circles. Looks like the Olympic symbol, only there's only 2 of them. The Venn diagram intersection of what was available on the shelves of Walmart versus what was available on the shelves of Whole Foods is almost non-existent. There's almost nothing in that middle. The products are all different. And I say that to say that the same is true of what you get on Fox News versus what you maybe get if you go to alternet.com. The way that we consume is radically different. It's just another way that our experiences as Americans in the growing absence of public space to be replaced by virtual public space, which is not the same thing. If you want to do a quick test to see what I mean, try talking some of the shit in person that you might be perfectly willing to be talking on a chat room board and see what happens, right? You'll see what the difference between virtual public space and actual lived on the ground public space is. And this plays out in many ways and has broad ramifications across the spectrum, but I forgot where I was going with that. My point is, I think that 2 spaces, yes, thank you, man. 2 spaces are radically different, and, you know, it's another way that we are segmented into smaller and more specific populations, not just because we're targeted that way by media and by advertising and by people who are profiling us to sell us specifically what they think we want, but because the fastest growing communities in this country are prisons and gated communities, right? So one way or another, by choice or through a profoundly unjust, racist, judicial and policing system, more and more Americans are living behind bars. So it becomes harder to come to a consensus because it becomes harder to experience reality in the same way when it is being promoted in such profoundly different ways, depending on where you lie on the spectrum of privilege, of wealth, of race privilege, of gender privilege, of all these different categories that we exist in and have to navigate. And, you know, I'm someone who writes sometimes satire. Some of my novels take a satirical bent, and it's becoming harder and harder to come up with anything to be satirical about because we're kind of through the looking glass on a lot of this shit. You have a vice presidential nominee who has given 3 interviews in the 3 weeks since she's been on the ticket. I don't know how many people have been following the Sarah Palin saga. What there is to follow that is because there's very little in the public sphere that's been allowed to be, you know, digested. But to watch her give interviews, to watch her be asked a question, respond with a soundbite, be asked a follow-up question, and respond with the exact same words, as if she is elaborating on a point, as if she had made a point to begin with, is staggering, is amazing. The fact that we are in a moment where a vice presidential nominee, and I'm not going to pick on Sarah for too much longer, but some of this stuff is so staggering that it really bears repeating. What is your foreign policy experience? Well, you can see Alaska. You can see Russia from parts of my state, Alaska. Word? And I think, you know, we see a lot of very clever maneuvering and strategizing by both campaigns. One of the most disturbing things I see in terms of media response, and this is, of course, a 24-hour news cycle. This is something that both these campaigns have to be masterful at. Spin control, propaganda, etc. Often what happens is an abject lie, an outright falsehood, a fabrication will be put forth by one of these 2 camps, one more than the other. And instead of reporting on it and putting it out there, as the media is supposed to do, as a falsehood, as absolute mendacity, instead what happens is, in the interest of fairness, they go to the other camp attempts to repudiate this statement, and the news presents it in a kind of balanced manner. So it'll be like, John McCain says that Barack Obama plans to raise taxes on middle-class Americans, right? Which is technically, to use a technical term, bullshit, right? It's just not true. So they go to the Obama camp. Obama said, well, no, that's not really what we plan to do. Well, McCain has this advertising saying that you do has been seen by 3 million people in all of these swing states. And so then what ends up happening in, say, USA Today or the New York Times or the Washington Post, mainstream outlets who all kind of read from the same playbook, right? Journalistic ethics are kind of, a playing field which is determined in terms of these traditional media establishments sort of by consensus, right? So the editorial standards of the Washington Post are not going to be that different from the Wall Street Journal or the Boston Globe or the Philadelphia Inquirer, right? So what they end up doing is presenting a story that says something like, presidential candidates spar on tax cuts, right? So an outright lie is repudiated, the media weighs it, and they say, well, we're not really going to weigh in here and definitively say that this person is lying. That only happens like on The View, when John McCain sits down on The View, right? We've entered an age where our most responsible political journalists, the people who are supposed to be the fourth estate, uncorruptible, are comedians and talk show hosts. Raise your hand if your most trusted journalist is either Jon Stewart or Steve Colbert, right? Raise your hand if you get your news from one of those two sources. Chris Rock, Dave Chappelle, a little bit MIA right now, but I wish he wasn't. I really want to know what Dave Chappelle has to say about this election. I really want to know what Gil Scott-Heron has to say about this election. That's another story. So we've gotten to this point where the spin is so out of control that objective reporting, brave reporting doesn't really happen. It happens under the guise of comedy. If you go to other countries and see the way the news is reported, the way that context is provided, it will blow your mind. I spent a lot of time in Sweden, for instance, right? And they're more up on American news than we are, for the most part, right? As is true, throughout much of the world. And in that country, for instance, there'll be a clip of George Bush giving a speech, and it's like, here's what Bush said today. Here's what Bush said 6 months ago about the same issue. Here's what Bush said a year and a half ago. And it's not that they're out to get Bush, it's that they're out to report responsibly on the evolving, changing, unpredictable, loop-de-loop rationales that Bush is providing for his actions, right? You don't see that much of that going on here. The parameters are way too narrow for that.
One other thing, Adam, briefly, if you can talk, because I want to make sure we do this, and I want to then take your mind. You've written about gender in some of the pieces that you wrote, some of the what's happening with Geraldine Ferraro. You've written on some of the commentary that took place between the issue on Obama and the questions about Farrakhan and Jeremiah Wright. And you did the piece on Bill Clinton and race. I want to just make sure we talk some today before we go to the audience about gender. Can you just speak to how you felt some of the issues that played out in terms of gender with Hillary Clinton? You talked about Sarah Palin a little bit, but just people have been talking about this question with media bias, a gender bias. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think that Vijay said it very well. It's been a cult of personality. It's been a notion of celebrity. Whether or not there has been a media bias around an issue of gender, certainly, I think it's very obvious to all of us that the nomination of Sarah Palin to the position of vice president was an attempt to capitalize on a certain kind of surge of interest and support of a female candidate, the move that Hillary Clinton, what she was able to accomplish. In her acceptance speech, in fact, Palin gives shout-outs to Clinton and to Geraldine Ferraro, which is an astounding move for somebody who is ideologically opposed to almost everything that either of those people stood for. She didn't mention Shirley Chisholm in that speech. No, she didn't. Another thing that you see more in 2008 than ever before, perhaps, is the meta-reporting, the way that the media reports on the media. So you will, turn on NPR on a Friday, and the lead story will be the percentage of news coverage received by Obama versus Clinton, or the percentage of stories that had a positive spin about McCain versus about Obama. The media is sort of, turning inwards and looking at itself as it proliferates. And I think that it's certainly worth looking at these notions of bias, whether it's race bias, whether it's gender bias, whether it's ideological bias. I don't know what I'm able to conclude. I don't have the statistics really at my disposal to be able to do so. It has seemed to me, I want to sort of hold two opposing ideas at the same time. One is that it seems to me that the outcry about bias has largely been insincere and an attempt to maneuver, again, through the political proceedings and take the attention off of things that direly need our attention, many of which have been mentioned by these other panelists here, from the prison industrial complex to the need for living wage jobs, and instead to complain about a perceived lack of proper coverage, a perceived slight. So on one hand, yes, that. On the other hand, it strikes me as incredibly likely, and something that we witnessed throughout the primaries and now in the general election season, that the race card is an incredibly powerful card, the gender card similarly, but in different ways. I think right now one of my main concerns going into the general election as the time ticks down is something called the Bradley effect. Do you all know what the Bradley effect is? Yeah? No? Bradley effect, named for a guy named Tom Bradley, who ran for mayor of Los Angeles, black candidate. And going up to the election, leading up to the election, he seemed to be leading in all of the polls. He was projected as a winner. He lost. He lost because lots of people felt very comfortable and even good about themselves telling pollsters that they were going to vote for this black candidate, but behind closed doors, that wasn't the case. So the Bradley effect is the tendency for people to tell pollsters, tell their friends, tell their families that they're going to vote for somebody who perhaps is of a different gender than them, a different race than them, and then behind closed doors do nothing of the kind. So even as Obama surges on the wake of this financial ruin, and like John McCain, I'm no economist, but although I can't lift my arms above my shoulders and use the internet. So we see this Obama surge, but I tend to worry very much, in addition to all my worries about voter fraud and in the wake of all the worries that folks up here have pointed out about various ways votes are not being counted, people are being disenfranchised, same old games again and again, 2000, 2004 continues to happen. I also worry about this Bradley effect and the likelihood that these polls are not as reflective of what folks will do behind closed doors as we might hope that they would be.
I want to give Maya the last word, and if you can bring us into some solutions, and if you want to also address that question of gender, that would be useful, I think, to get us started.
I just want to, conclude by saying that this is this is the most important election of our lifetimes. And you all are a witness to history, but I hope that you're going to be a participant in history. Meaning that some of my colleague here said that this is your home. Angela said this is your home. Certainly this campus is your home, certainly this state is your home, but definitely this country is your home. And we do still live in a country where your voice matters, but you have to articulate that voice. You have to act on it. There's a simple formula here, and it's education, organization, and action. Education, meaning that you have to, I'm sorry, but you gotta go beyond the Xbox, you gotta go beyond the television shows. It's time to turn all of that off, because we're talking about a situation here that is too serious to ignore. It's about your standard of living in the future. It's about whether your children and your children's children will have even a standard of living that you enjoy right now. The direction we're going is a direction that's downhill. We are literally seeing in our lifetimes the decline of the America that we know. We are literally seeing it happen now. And what's going on in Capitol Hill, they're not even talking about it, is that the government can't afford this bailout. The government is in the same position that these companies are in terms of being in high leverage debt and obligated to other countries for the money. And so we keep printing money and issuing debt that we cannot afford. And you're going to be paying for it, and your kids are going to be paying for it. So we got an issue of the economy. We got an issue of healthcare. People are dying because they can't afford it. We got an issue of education. 50% of African Americans, Latinos are not graduating from high school, part of the undereducation and the miseducation of our kids. We got a situation with Iraq, HIV/AIDS, the prison industrial complex. I mean, the problems are huge. The problems are huge. And the only way we're going to combat this is if people take back their power. It's about stepping into your power. I have been all over this country and I've talked to young people. And generally I run into, and you know them. You know, your cousin Pookie along the way who's basically saying, I ain't voting. You know, what am I going to vote for? You know, the election's already decided anyway. Or why am I going to vote? You know, this is a racist country. I don't feel like I'm a part of this country. Well, you know, when people talk like that, I'm just like, okay, you're giving away your power. Basically, it's a form of modern day slavery. Because other people are going to step into that void and articulate what's going to happen with your money. And when I say your money, I'm talking about your tax dollars. You're paying it through your contributions, through your payroll tax and everything else. You're paying it, and the people that get elected make the decisions about where those monies go. And when you're not speaking out, somebody else is making the decision for you, and that means that you have given away your power and you're virtually a slave. So what can you do? What can you do? I mean, it's about mobilization, it's about vocalization, and it's about subsidization. What do I mean by that? Mobilization, organizing, voting, getting out there, registering, going out there and telling your fellow colleagues that it's not about sitting at home anymore. That's played. It's about getting out and acting. This is the time. If ever we needed this now. Vocalize, getting your voices heard, writing, speaking out, going online, blogging, doing everything you can in order to get people interested in speaking your mind about the issues. Because it's about people hearing what you have to say and getting people to agree with you, and then mobilizing those people to agree with you to move as a block and politically. Subsidize, what do I mean by that? I mean actually contribute. So it's about also, unfortunately, money runs things, right? So it's about giving money to the candidate of your choice. It's about giving money to the organization of your choice. It's about, and it doesn't have to be big money. It can be $5, $10, $15. So vote, write, speak up, give, organize. Protest is a legitimate form of political participation. What M1 did is certainly a form of political participation. You can certainly do that. Volunteering, but most of all, certainly getting educated. It's not enough to say Sarah Palin looks cute, so let's go vote for John McCain and Sarah Palin. It's not enough to say, well, I like the way that Michelle and Barack look. It's about what do they stand for. And it's about understanding that through and through, and whether what they stand for aligns with your interests. And if it aligns with your interests, it's about going out and supporting that person in every way that you can. And it's also about you getting involved and stepping into your power. And I want to just end with this, and that is, most young people think that politics and your involvement ends on the day that the election takes place. And that's when your responsibility really begins. What do I mean by that? Now, first of all, there's several levels to this. There are, it's not just about presidential politics every 4 years. There are elections taking place at every level of government, from school board to your county officials, to your city officials, to your state officials, to your congressional officials. And that means that you have to be interested, if you care about your home, that means you have to be interested on every level and you have to be engaged on every level. So certainly that's ongoing. And these elections are taking place all the time. So get knowledgeable about when the timeline is for that. Secondly, it's about knowing your issues and advocating for your issues on a continual basis. If you care about the environment, if you care about education, if you care about healthcare, get involved. Get in your lane in terms of getting involved with an organization or starting your own or blogging online or organizing online to get people to think the same way that you do and knocking on doors. These people that we elect don't just go off into the sunset. I used to work on Capitol Hill, and I had to answer constituent mail. That means who are constituents? That's you. They're voters. Those elected officials are responsible to you because your vote is basically their affirmation into office. And if you don't give them your vote, then they're out of office. And so you have power. You've got to leverage it. That means that you have to advocate, you have to knock on these doors, you have to hold these elected officials accountable. So after Election Day, it's about getting into your groove and working it on all levels and in every way you can. Thank you.
All right. we're gonna open it up to the floor if there are questions. And if you can direct it to a specific panelist, if possible, and if that panelist can stay to a 1 to 2 minute time frame. Okay. Yes.
A little PSA, this is not an announcement. If there's anyone in this room that is not registered to vote in Davidson County, all right, you can do that before you leave here today. And you can fill out easy form, and I will hand carry it for you to the registrar's office tomorrow. So that's my little PSA.
Okay. Anyone? Yes, sir.
This is Judge Vijay. We talked about this a little earlier, but with the restructuring of the international financial order, what's your prognosis for the third world and for the new world order, the new power that's going to develop over the next 10, 20, 30 years?
1 minute?
Okay. 1 to 2.
You know, I've spent my whole life waiting for the demise of the American empire. But I didn't expect it to happen like this. You know, I mean, I'm actually looking forward to a conversation domestically about changing our priorities. You know, moving away from an oil-based industrial society to a society where people actually can walk to their place of work, can walk to the store, buy locally. You know, those conversations need to be front and center. We actually need to change the way we have a standard of living domestically. Because our standard of living right now is premised on imperial domination of resources, of other countries, etc. So the American empire, in a sense, Saddam Hussein and others are laughing. Because they say who is going to win, actually, in the long run. You've destroyed Iraq, but you're trapped there. You've destroyed Afghanistan again, and I don't mean invasion in 2001, I mean invasion in 1978, when we joined the battle then to, as they say, cage the bear. That was what Brzezinski says. When the Soviets came in, they said, we should cage the bear. That's the start of the destruction of Afghanistan from then, when the Soviets and Americans went at it as a playground. So that imperial overreach is one thing. You know, we've compromised ourselves. Secondly, we've given ourselves over to financiers, you know, in an incredibly outrageous way, much more than normal capitalism. Capitalism is in crisis. International capitalism has decided that almost 1 billion people have been rendered disposable. You know, they live in slums all around the planet. I mean, this foreclosure crisis domestically comes from this idea that everybody, even the disposable, should have a right to a house. You know, we are in a sense kidding ourselves. On the one side we say we have a disposable section. Secondly, we say, well, they have the right to American standard of living, let's give them mortgages. You know, I mean, we're both trying to fantasize about the American standard of living and live in a system which has rendered 1 billion people disposable. Capitalism is in serious crisis. This bailout is about salvaging capital, giving a band-aid to capitalism. You know, politics is about protesting, it's about all these things, but it's also about letting our imagination soar. Can we imagine a system out of this garbage, which says that 1 billion people are disposable and should live in slums, in Beirut, in Caracas, in Detroit. These are all kindred souls living in slums, rendered outside. They have to be, as you very nicely put it, gated out of existence. So if that is the system we want to salvage, forget it, I'm not with you. I want us to imagine a better system. You know, and it's really our work together, creating organizations, institutions, dreams, putting dreams into programs that's going to save the future. Of course, this is an opening for multipolarity. You know, Latin America is going to give us some leadership. We see now rearrangements around the world. People are thinking, you know, the American fist is lifted off our necks. Can we now start thinking again? If in South Africa new developments emerge, it will give breath of fresh air to the whole continent. You know, right now, the ANC has acted as a sub-imperial element in Africa. If Mbeki's ANC has to take the back seat, let's see what happens. If in Africa there can be a new kind of renaissance, maybe not like South America, because the game hasn't been prepared. But we need imagination to soar, not just protests and stuff, you know. That has to be there. But you have to protest with imagination, not protest to salvage this, you know, yesterday's thing.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So basically, BRIC. You're talking BRIC countries: Brazil, Russia, India, and China, being the new leverage points around the globe in terms of. If you look at Brazil, I mean, their economy, and this is a quote-unquote previously second, third world country, doing quite well. Russia is, of course, oil money. India and China. China is monetized to a high extent. The United States is a debtor nation. We owe China. We owe these countries because we're leveraged beyond what we can afford to pay. So what we're seeing is really the decline of the American empire, so to speak, through financial arrangements, through global financial arrangements where we're basically owned by other countries. And basically, in this crisis, they're sitting on the sidelines because they don't want to invest anymore. And so with that, we're going to see, I think, a realignment globally where America is not going to be the leader in the world. And you're absolutely right. There's a good aspect to that. But certainly it means that you have to think differently about your country and about ourselves as Americans.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
I got a text message. This is like for everyone. But
You got to pick someone. You have to pick a person that you want to answer your question, because otherwise we're going to have chaos up in there. Who would you like to ask your question directly to?
What's your question? And I'll fix it.
All right.
Recently, I got a text message saying, "Oh, don't wear Obama shirts to the election polls." I don't know if you went over this.
Yes.
What's the answer?
The answer is you can take your pen off, you can take your hat off, you can turn your shirt inside out, and you can still go vote. And when you're done voting, you can put all your stuff back on, okay? So please get that word out, because it's a mass text message that's literally blowing up everybody's cell phones. And if you all don't text people back and be like, here's what you got to do, there's a lot of people that's probably going to say, forget it. I want to go in and represent, I'm not going to go vote. So if you all don't get that message out that here's what you got to do, please still go vote. This is crucial. But to also piggyback on what my colleagues have said, I guess for me, for a lot of these rap sessions, is please learn from the mistakes. This country has made so many mistakes. And right now, I never wanted to believe something my grandmother taught me about history has a way of repeating itself and just continue to be a circle cycle. You all have got to change it. Just like my counterpart right here said, it's your dreams that have to now be produced to actually come to fruition. Do something different. Change what's going on. You just made a good point. You're getting a text message doing this. Why can't we send a text message on, do anybody know who's running for Congress in my district? Because they're about to vote on this serious budget crisis, and I don't know where he's at, and we might need to text him or her to make sure they're going to take the right position. Because right now, what do you all have left when you leave this university? Think about it. Foreclosure crisis, jobs, you become professional students, and you got loans to pay back. What's going to be left for you when you leave from here? If you don't take control of right now, what do you have to lose? What do you have to lose? Who do you have to owe besides, the banks might not even be there by the time you get ready to pay back the loans. Let's just keep it real for this conversation. You might not owe back anybody. Or it might be somewhere in Sweden or Russia, who knows? But if you don't take control of it now, think about the 8-year-old that's coming behind. Think about the 2 little people that just walked in this room. There's 2 little people back there. What's going to be left here in America for them? So just think about that. I'm sorry,
I want to say I received the same text just as I was walking in this room, Angela. And so it was ironic that because just before you spat that out of your mouth, I was about to say, well, what's up with them saying? But I think it's phenomenal for a couple of other reasons. Because as such a fashion-forward people that we are, I think it becomes a different kind of phenomenon when we're talking about this age group motivated to go to the polls. Because I mean, I don't know, because I never voted for any president yet. I mean, I could have, but I chose to abstain, to your dismay. However, I do know that because of who we are, the heightened sensitivity of what you wear when you go to the polls is very important right now. It probably wasn't when Clinton was going in office, but I'm pretty sure it is now because of you people. So I think that's also other thing that we have to pay attention to, which is phenomenal for this period of time right now.
Next question in the back.
I guess this would be directed to you on the end. I know there's been a lot of talk about different women's issues, and Roe versus Wade keeps getting brought up again and again. And I wonder if people talking about overturning that decision is a tricky way to get elected, or whether that's an actual possibility that decision might take place.
It's an actual possibility, and this is why.
Okay.
And this is why the stakes are, it's another reason why the stakes are so high, is because it's Supreme Court politics. And I don't think I'm being partisan, I'm being factual when I talk about the Republican, it's been no secret agenda, that the Republican agenda for the last some odd half a century has been about restricting Roe v. Wade, because they believe in the right to life as long as the baby is still in the womb. But once it's actually given birth, then they don't care about the child anymore. But with that, what we have here is Supreme Court politics. It's likely that the next president, now mind you, George Bush has been in office for the last 8 years, and he has appointed two Supreme Court justices. What we're having now are these 5-4, decisions and whatnot. With the conservatives, with one swing vote here or there. The next president of the United States of America will likely be able to appoint one or two, likely two, Supreme Court justices. If that president is a conservative president and they are beholden to those who voted them into office, which many consider to be the right wing of the Republican Party, which is very much evangelical, which is very much concerned about the pro-life agenda, then they're going to kowtow. In fact, McCain has indicated that he will defer to their interests and appoint people who have those views. That means that women, it's a very real possibility that Roe v. Wade can be overturned.
I think Dr. Patterson has a...
Last night on one of the cable stations, I heard something that just blew my mind. Some local congressman in Louisiana, in the same district that sent David Duke to political office, has proposed paying poor women to be sterilized. Yeah?
It's voluntary, which is why it's not.
I mean, it's safe.
It's not voluntary when you've got someone so poor and you offer them enough money, then they will give up their right to reproduce. The whole principle of eugenics, of sterilization of women and the poor, is itself seriously problematic. And in addition to that, to encourage wealthy women to have more babies. Okay? Now we had something like that, I believe, in Germany at one time. And we've had that in the 1930s, and we've had it in the 1920s, and we've had it before. So I think the comments several of these panelists have made to you as students is what I need to underscore. You must deepen your education. You must take control of your education. And I say that as a faculty member of Vanderbilt University. Yes, you can take classes with me and a lot of other people. I'm not talking about classes. I'm talking about the 88 election and how much young people were in that. And one reason I slept that moment, I realized when he reminded me, is I was one of those young people. And it was after 1988 that I left the Democratic Party. I left it because I was sickened by what happened between 1980 and 1988. He didn't mention it, but in 1980, there was an attempt to build a black political party called the National Black Independent Political Party. I was a graduate student in Minnesota. I was dead up in that mess, in that piece. And, right? And it was aborted by the third year after the Chicago Convention. We realized that it was aborted, but we had another meeting. We kept going. It was a bunch of young college students. We kept going. We had a conference at Atlanta University, and we called it the National Black Organizing Committee. Some of those young people from that organization are professors. I know 2 that are professors at MIT. Those 2 had worked with the Dinkins campaign. Okay, we tried again, and we were very active in the Jesse Jackson campaign. Once that got killed, once I saw the inside of the Democratic Party, once I read the platforms of the Republican and the Democratic Party and realized there was no democracy in either one of them, I left and I completely stopped being politically active. I didn't stop teaching. I didn't stop educating. I didn't stop pushing the political politics and the need for change. But I stopped. And this election brought me back, not because the agenda is the way I want it to be, because it isn't, but because for the first time we can crack open, at least I think, the stalemate that is now America and the tragedy that we're in. And we've got to have conversation, and I hope that students in this room will leave here not just saying, wasn't that an interesting panel, but have conversation in your room, in your dorm, in our houses, in your frat clubs, wherever you can, and do things right here on this campus that becomes preparation for leadership.
I think in keeping with your time, you might be at the time, right?
Any more questions?
Let's take right here.
Here, that's another hand. Here and here. So we'll take those 5 questions.
Okay, 5 more. You're first.
So, just in, taking all this information, there's a lot. I'm coming up with a concern, and I'm kind of trying to formulate it now. I think it's directly maybe one of you. But we talked about consumerism, and we talked about the fact that the way in which you consume is so important to just everything. But then we also talked about the illiteracy of a lot of the population in this country, especially when it comes to politics, and kind of just scaling it to the hip hop community. I'm just kind of coming to a block when I'm thinking, like, how can we stimulate people in this community to be conscious consumers politically when there's a lot of underdevelopment with how we consume, just hip hop, in itself. We're not critical of what we're taking into our ears, the kind of entertainment that we're consuming and supporting the artists, you know what I mean? And then at the same time, it's kind of like we're only, you talked about either being able to choose category A or category B, and those 2 categories may not represent what we feel is our voice or our struggle or whatever, so we're limited and we're also uneducated. So it's kind of like we're put in this place and everybody's like, well, vote, 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 and then you have a lot of people who are kind of like frantic, who are like, okay, well, I'm going to vote for Barack because he's black, and they don't know his platform, they're not educated about the kind of like ropes that we talked about that are holding him back. And so I'm just worried that, these uninformed decisions, even if they are to put Barack into office, then what? Because like we said, this is not the birth of, just an agenda coming to power, but it's a person. And when he can't fulfill all the needs and wants and desires and dreams that we hope he can because he's the first black president, then what do we do with all those people who we've already, built up so much, like, hurry up and vote, it's so important the time is now.
Why don't we take 2 other questions over here, and then they answer that, we'll take the one from the right side.
Okay. Who we have?
Right here, right here.
I want to ask a simple question. I know you mentioned earlier about the whole hip hop movement and how that correlated with the election, but I just want to get the exact role that hip hop played.
Okay.
Sorry.
We got 2 more. Oh, in the back here,
We'll take it on this side, then we'll take this side.
Okay.
I don't know if you touched on this, I arrived a little bit late, but have you talked about campaign spending at all? No? Okay. My question was for you, on the end, you talked about media coverage. One of my concerns as I've been watching this is how much wealth each campaign is amassing to get media coverage. And it's kind of, the trend looks like that you almost have, like, the candidates in the future, not just obviously Obama's like setting fundraising records and things, but like in 4 years, 8 years, how much money is it going to require to be elected president? Like how much to buy your media coverage? Because it seems to me like if it continues on this trend, like the candidates are going to have to get wealthier and wealthier and more elite, and you're only going to get incredibly wealthy candidates running for president. So, junior senators or ambitious young congressmen, people who are running on their policies, I feel like won't have enough money to win. So I was wondering what your thoughts on that were.
Well, I think we're at that point already, and maybe have.
I think we're gonna take off.
Oh, I'm
We're
sorry.
gonna get the 5 questions first, right? That was it. Okay. We're just taking that side. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I mean,
Sorry.
well, a couple of things. I think in many ways we're already at that point. In 8 years, dudes are gonna have to borrow money from Vladimir Putin, probably. But in this election cycle, for instance, you look at certain candidates who were viewed as marginal from the beginning because they didn't have that kind of financial backing on both sides of the ledger, right? Where's the real conservative, said the conservatives. Well, Sam Brownback was pretty damn conservative. He pretty much fulfilled all that was needed of him. He only raised $70,000 total, right? So he was out. Dennis Kucinich, probably the most progressive guy in the race, by far, was not able to get the finances together to do anything. So I think in many ways we're there. The flip side of that is that everybody seems to agree now that campaign ads, the kind of huge purchasing, $3 million of television space on Michigan television, and other swing states, is increasingly becoming irrelevant because the ads are canceling each other out. People, as consumers, and this speaks a little bit to your point about educated consumership and media literacy, people are increasingly media literate enough to reject these ads as being manipulative, as being stupid, as being unrelated to content, as just being blatant attacks and being shallow. And you're seeing both campaigns releasing ads directly to the media and getting them, played for free on by the media rather than actually purchasing them. There are ads that have never been shown on TV but nonetheless have national exposure because CNN will be like, here's the new McCain ad. So we're negotiating a number of things here, I think. Can I say something else, Bakari? Very quickly?
Yeah.
Okay, because the conversation of Roe versus Wade made me think of a very important point, and another reason this election is so significant, aside from all the incredibly profound reasons that everybody out here has laid out that are issue-based, is one that is psychological in nature. And it's the fact that your generation and mine have come up in a world where we have never really won a significant political victory. And that's important for so many reasons, but primarily because the enormous galvanizing effect of a victory, of a win, empowers people to go on and do political work for the rest of their lives. Imagine, for instance, we're in a situation where our generation has been we've been back on our heels, attempting to retain the rights that we already have, attempting to keep abortion legal, attempting to retain the advances of the civil rights and black power movements, the women's movement, attempting to keep new prisons from being built rather than shutting existing ones down, right? Very much back on our heels. That's the game, that's the playing field that we've been dealt. So we've never had the experience of ending a war, of passing a significant law like Roe versus Wade in 1973, or seeing Brown versus the Board of Education come into being in 1954. These things are so powerful, so significant that they empower us to go on and continue for the rest of our lives, or for a good portion of them, to be invested enough to commit to this work in all of the ways that these panelists are encouraging you to do. And without that experience, when your formative experiences are things like, the most important experience of my life politically was probably the Rodney King verdict in 1992. That was not a happy day. That was a day of enormous frustration, rage, disillusionment. If I was able to counter that with something on the other side, a victory for a candidate or a cause that I thought was really significant, it would probably change me in a way that I can't even calculate.
Let me chime in for a little bit. I want to kind of combine what you said and what you're saying as far as, first of all, Obama needs a team. He's one man, and he needs a team. So if he is if we don't pick the right congressional U.S. senator leaders, it's going to be tough for him to move this agenda called home. So we have to keep that in mind. That's why I keep being repetitive on that. Because everybody looks at the president as the beginning and the end all of everything, and that is totally a myth. Okay, it's a myth. And we have to pay attention to these other bodies of the legislature that have just as much control as he does. They either sign off or don't sign off, or give him a go or don't give him a go. But also in this election, let's not everybody wants you to do. In 2004, we got hung up on gay marriage, we got hung up on biostem research, we got hung up and it didn't create a job, it didn't do nothing with living wage, it didn't do nothing with universal health care, it didn't do anything to address student loans and affordable higher education. It didn't do anything because we got stuck on these issues. And in the same umbrella, we all are looking to work, have an income where we can come home and not worry about losing our home to foreclosure. We're looking for universal and affordable health care. We're looking for the gas prices to go down. Please don't get caught up in some of these issues. And I understand that, again, history repeating themselves, and yes, we can make history overturn them, but look at the issues we need, our issues of survival, that we have to, in this election, make sure that the leadership carries those out. The other thing, hip-hop playing a role. Hip-hop has been able to get young people out in volumes that I have never seen it. Now, I was there young in '88 with Jesse Jackson, and I was pissed too, because I was only 19, and I didn't understand what the older people couldn't see that I was seeing. And he did give me a sense of ownership, because he was speaking a language we weren't hearing. And now we have it again. Obama didn't follow this through the ranks, and neither did Palin. Everybody's like, well, I'm not trying to, say I'm for or against her, but I'm saying, look at the dynamics of this. She didn't become a senator and now become the typical vice president candidate. He didn't spend 2 terms in the Senate and have all this long track record. He came right in as a first-term senator and said, I'm going to be president, and here I am. This is unusual. This has got the party usuals baffled. This has them baffled because this is not what they're accustomed to. They're accustomed to, you got to run once, fail once. This man ran a primary, won it, beat the Clinton train, and now he's it. And that's not heard of. So that in itself comes from where? The power of you all. Young people came out in droves. People being on megaphones. And not just the hip-hop artists and icons, but I keep saying, hip-hop is you. It's you. Your counterparts are listening to you. They're listening to your lyrics. They're listening to the college DJs and responding to that. They're listening to you. You are actually the voice of hip-hop. Yeah, T.I.'s out here. Yeah, M1 and all of us are out here. But in the end, it's you. And then the finances, that's sickening. It's sick. My state is $540 million in debt. We're about to lay off another probably 1,000 some odd employees. It's real. It's sickening to see they've got billions of dollars in both parties, and here we still got homeless people. Here we got all these disenfranchised. We're in prison. We're enslaved in our own country. So how can we go overseas and save anybody? It's sickening. And true, they have to spend the money on media, and I'm sick of watching the media because nobody wakes up till 2 weeks out anyway to what the TV ads are saying. It's just depressing. And I hope when it's over, they take that money and invest it back in some way, somehow, into these vulnerable communities. Ike was real for Texas. They're still trying to find themselves down there, and we're not done with hurricane season. So hopefully, and coming from a party, I vocalize that. And I encourage you all to vocalize that too about these finances and what you're going to do whether you win or lose with them when it's over.
All right, this side. Let's just get this side, and we'll come back around. This is always the hard part. How many we get? 5 over here too?
No, 2 or 3. Go ahead. All right, my question was for Adam. Technology has been front and center in this campaign. Both of the candidates have MySpace accounts, they have Facebook accounts, they have YouTube accounts. As you said, there are a lot of options on cable TV and in the blogosphere. My question is, do you think technology is good for a democracy, and why?
That's a good question.
Then here, and then Nathan.
And my question sort of is in line with yours. Democracy is completely dependent on voting. And in this election, and I may not be in the right circles, but I hear very little about the downsides of electronic voting and not having a paper trail. I guess one very pragmatic point is for those of us when we go to the polls, if we want some sort of receipt saying, I want to know that my vote, when I push a button, is going to the person that I think I'm choosing. So I guess my question is that, can we do that? And then, just in general, what are we to make of electronic voting?
Another good question.
There's been a lot of talk, and I mean, pretty much to death about how race has impacted the election, and how Barack Obama's race, or black, or whatever race is, how it's affected the election. But my question is, if Barack Obama were to win or were to become president, how would race affect that administration's ability to actually move action?
That's another good question.
I was just curious to see what y'all thought about, the hip hop music world has gone through significant changes, and even all exposure that gets people, young people, excited is good, because I feel as though there's a lot of examples of new hip hop that's very popular that is culturally damaging as well. So.
That's another good question. All right, so let's see. Who wants to be first? Okay. Okay.
And let me repeat it back to you because I want to make sure I got it right. Are you asking if Barack Obama is elected president, how will race impact his presidency? Sure. Okay. I think on several levels. I mean, we're already seeing a situation where Barack Obama cannot be seen as being aligned with, for example, black interests. In fact, we have national people basically saying, giving him advice that, he needs to prove to white America that he's not going to be just a black president. So that means what we have here, even in the election season, is the day after Barack Obama wins the nomination, he goes to AIPAC, which is a Jewish Israel lobby. And he basically tells him exactly what he's going to do for them, what he's going to support policy-wise in terms of the nation of Israel and what he's going to do for the Jewish people. The next week after that, he goes to a women's group meeting, and he gives them a 10-point plan, telling them exactly what he's going to do for women, policy-wise, in terms of, equal pay for equal work and all this. And then we see Father's Day Sunday, where he comes to the black community right after he wins the nomination.
Also in the Cuban community in Florida also before that.
Okay, he went to the Cuban community and told them what he was going to do for them. Right. And then he comes to the black community and says that you're all bad fathers and that, and all this other stuff. Basically, no policy content, no promises, nothing like he had been saying in terms of, that's already tactical, and it does two things. On one hand, what it does for white America is shows that he's not in the pocket of black America. And for some, it's even saying, oh, he can speak bad to those black people, to those bad black people. Another thing it does is, and what it does is to raise the, the question mark, what will African Americans actually get out of an Obama presidency? Now, this is a situation. I don't know if you know, I mean, there's a formula when it comes to the Palestinian-Israel situation. Presidents won't touch it until the last second of their second term. And that is because it is so highly toxic. They don't want to do anything that, is going to, so that's something that they don't want to address up front. So they keep it to the back end. The question becomes, if Obama's already showing us this in a pre-election situation, what will his presidency be and what will it mean for the issues that face black America? And I have been speculating internally and talking to people around me that it may mean that we will not see issues that we care about addressed until the very last minute. Now, the issue here, and this is serious because it's going to have questions in terms of the Congressional Black Caucus, how they operate and deal with this man. It's going to have questions in terms of how each and every one of our communities and how we hold, this president accountable. That means that I think that African Americans are going to have to get more sophisticated than they have been in the past. We have tended to define political participation almost strictly in terms of the vote, and then we go home and hang it up. It's going to take engagement. It's going to take advocacy on a sustained level. It's going to take strategic engagement. It's going to take ongoing strategic engagement to be a part of the system, to get those issues in. And it might not be, okay, reparations. Barack, why aren't you for reparations? You know, it might be that you're talking about, okay, you know, quietly on the down tip, in a larger wealth agenda, closing the wealth gap agenda. It might be, okay, you know, how can we equalize income levels and redistribute income through the tax code perhaps or some other way in order to make sure that we have a situation where people of color are also helped and not just white America. Now, that's on one level. On another level, there's a question of how race will be impacted internationally. Because there have been some people in this election who have said, well, if Barack Obama becomes president, the rest of the world will look favorably upon the America because he is an African American, and you know we've had all these arrogant white men in for so long. You know, Barack Obama can come in and deal well with the Hugo Chavez's of the world. Now that theory has yet to be tested. We do know that most of the world wants Barack Obama to win. I think because they're so sick and tired of the last 8 years of George Bush, they don't want somebody who's worse than George Bush coming into office. And that's the prospect that we're facing right now. But this multi-levels that we have to understand. But what I'm saying is it's up to, if you want issues that impact African Americans to be addressed, that means that it's time for African Americans to graduate. And graduation means being more sophisticated in terms of our politics and being multi-pronged in our strategy.
Okay. We still got two more questions that were already asked. Okay, yeah. So I want to let's let thank you, Maya. I want to give M1 and Vijay the last word in response to those questions, and we want to call it a wrap. So should I read the questions, or you know what?
I'm just gonna kind of go off, and then you can.
Okay.
And I'm gonna be quick too, so I don't have to be the last word. But I like to just kind of echo what Dr. Rockeymoore said. I wish she could have been here to meet for me to say that a sustained agenda, political agenda, is what we need. A lot of times when we sit on this panel, we seem diametrically opposed somewhat because between Dr. Rockeymoore and where I stand, and it's because I believe how we intend to engage the system. But I do think there has to be a sustained agenda that we engage with, but it has to be concentrated. See, the same with what Brother said in the back, how it seems like you're going to have to be rich in order to be president or run for president. America elects its leadership from the top down. And the idea is that we have to produce leadership from the ground up. The grassroots that's what I think is going to be the determining factor. I think there are ways to vote long before we ever get to the office. Long before we ever get to the poll. That there are ways that we can show our political strategy, be a part of a movement that, for instance, Huey P. Newton said education is this. Said this about education. The best education is received by observation and participation. That's the best education is received by observation and participation. So with that being said, we can theorize for days and days and go in these classrooms and talk about what we think will happen, but until we put something on the ground, until we go put our theory down on the ground and test it in the real world, go out and knock on doors, go out and see what it really takes to change somebody's mind about what's going down in our community, we can't even talk about being a part of a political process. You're not part of a political process because you pull the lever. You're not. You have to put in a whole lot more work than that. And that, on the grassroots level, creates such a huge fervor. I mean, there would be a point where the Black Panther Party was the #1 threat to the internal security of the United States government under J. Edgar Hoover and COINTELPRO, and that was not because they were some gun brandishing black people. It was because of the community service programs. The programs which would put clinics in our community. They would go door to door and talk about political education. It's going to be political education that's the deciding factor about how much more sophisticated we become, like Dr. Rockeymoore said, how much more sophisticated we become, and whether we sit back and let somebody else drive the ship. That's going to be the thing. It's going to be our political education, not what we do in this particular place, but what you do outside of this place and in your community. And I kind of wanted to talk about hip hop a little bit, and I'll say this before I get out of here. You got to know, you got to be aware that hip hop is part and parcel to the right hand of the government, which is the media. Hip hop is inclusive in it. It is controlled by the same entities that benefit from the people that you pay your taxes to, which is the reason why it acts and looks that way. That's the reason why you can't see independent hip-hop get a leg of its own so we can speak for ourselves, because there ain't no funding for that. And what we will fund is chaos and confusion and all kind of things that are detrimental to what's good for our community. Somebody like me, or even anybody else, not even like me. When Jay-Z gets on a song with me, they won't even play it on the radio, because it becomes something different than what hip-hop, and hip-hop becomes a code word for criminalization in the community, or just shucking and jiving. So there's two different agendas that's going on inside this conversation. There's a whole lot more I wanted to address here, but I really don't want to take up the rest of the time. I want to thank y'all for letting me be here, and we can talk afterwards.
We'll let Vijay have the last word, and we'll call it a night. Thank you all. You've been great.
I'd like to talk about patience and programmatic thinking. We get taught about the importance of civics, knowing how the system works. But what we don't get taught enough about is how to do politics, how to think programmatically, how to have with a group of people an analysis of what the world is today, an analysis of what is possible, going out into communities, testing that analysis of programmatic thinking, coming back, refining it, and knowing that through that entire process, what you need more than anything else is patience and love for other people. If you don't have patience, you'll burn out, you'll turn away from the process of transforming the world. You need patience. You need to be with us when we're 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years old and still struggling, starting 20 years ago, coming now forward to almost 50. It's patience that keeps you going. And it's love for humanity. Because human beings, and this you can learn from King, you may not like human beings at all, but if you don't love humanity, you will not struggle through them, with them. You can't demonize people because they believe the crap that's fed to us. You have to come in there, struggle with people, but not struggle with them blindly. Struggle programmatically. It's patience, it's love, it's a program.
All right.
I want to close first by thanking you. The last questions, the questions before that, all of the questions demonstrate that you have the intellectual capacity to do the kind of work that you've been called upon to do. And I know that about the students at Vanderbilt, although I'm new to this campus. But I also know you need to be pushed. You need to work up to your capacity. You are bright, but you can get lazy being bright. Just read what you need to read or what you like. The kind of work they're calling upon you to do takes commitment, takes serious commitment, to go above and beyond what you are doing on an everyday basis. It takes the willingness to debate with each other, to argue with professors, not just to be arguing with them, but to get understanding, to go outside your communities. And it does take a love for humanity. It takes caring about people. That is so very, very important. And I care a great deal about what happens here while I'm a professor here. Because in about 10 years, I'm going to retire because I'm old. I didn't say so, but Bakari was my student as an undergraduate. I was a graduate student. He was an undergraduate student. And he and his little gang used to give me pure hell.
It was 88. It was 1988.
It was 1988. I was a pre-doctoral fellow, and they were undergraduate students. And I reminded him of that today because I haven't forgotten as I watched them grow. Some are professors now, but they all remained committed to social justice and change. And it started in that willingness to be pushed, to be called out when stuff was raggedy. I remember one of our group was speaking cocktail Arabic and pretending to be a radical, and I called him on it. Now you can't say any more than Assalamu alaikum. Bakari fought me tooth and nail over were gender questions in the novels that he had to read in my class, and now he's talking about gender. Okay. I say that because I do believe that change agents come out of universities like Vanderbilt. I do believe that. I believe you can go over and above what you think you can do. And I think that it's wonderful to be in the Commons because we have a house where I can sit and talk to students, one-on-one, in groups, and I hope we get comfortable enough in the coming weeks that we can sit at my dining room table and argue politics. And I can challenge, but you have your part to play. And your part to play is to do the work while you're here. Not only in classes, but beyond that, beyond what any professor can give you. Ultimately, you are the architect of your own intellectual development, and therefore the architect of your own political engagement. To this young woman here, when I was listening to you, yes, it's a lot to know, but you start somewhere. You start with this election. And finally, Obama is only one man. Okay? I'm excited about his candidacy, but I'm not confused about the agenda of the political structure. You have to hold, someone like him needs us. And he's actually said that a few times. He can't do it alone. He needs us to hold his feet to the fire, to raise the questions. We got to get him elected first. But we still can't go home. And part of what we've done in our democracy, we've come to think that democracy is about putting somebody in office and being comfortable that they're going to carry everything out while we can go party. That's not a democracy. Democracy is being engaged with our leaders and being on top of what they're doing and being willing to call them on their stuff. And to do that, you also have to know what your issues are and stay engaged the rest of your life. You know, it doesn't, and I don't mean anything dramatic, but pay attention. Know when the media you're reading is fraudulent. I stopped listening to Fox, even just to be educated, because it was giving them ratings. I don't want to give them any ratings. But I'm also critical of CNN and MSNBC, even though I like them. Okay? You have to always be there and be willing to say something in your communities. I want to thank you for coming and staying through this conversation. That's a sign of commitment. And I want to thank Rap Sessions for coming and talking with you openly and honestly and directly. And I will be assigning Vijay Prashad's books. And I have a course I want to use at a Mansbach books in. And I'm going to go listen to M1 because I haven't before.
I want Campus Congress representative is here. She just wants to say some words. Paul?
Yeah, I think everybody can hear me from here. We're really excited to be associated with Bakari and the Rap Session panel as always. And you guys never failed to amaze us at how wonderful you are at talking to students. So thank you for hosting us. As architects of the destiny, Campus Congress really has a lot of resources you can use to make events like this happen more often. And also, if you're just looking for a place to start by way of how to build coalitions or how to figure out how to get your voice heard and what's important to you, we're always here to help and talk. And as a nonpartisan organization, we're really all about you and not advancing any one person's candidacy or any one person's platform. So if you want to talk to me more about how we can do things like this, come and see me afterwards.
I'd like to ask you for a round of applause for our guests. Thank you so much.
If you want to register to vote, you can register over here and over here.